It's a beautiful morning here in the Cotswolds, UK. I'm a boat builder and I'm currently building a boat called Temptress, designed by Michelle Berriette and kitted by myself to be built utilising the latest in CAD design, CNC cutting and modern epoxy wood construction. Let's take a look at it. So in the previous episode, I got all of the frames stood up in the strong back and I started landing the first timbers on the boat to see how all of this CNC pre-shaping process that I've been doing was working out. I was very pleasantly surprised by that and it's all looking pretty good at this stage. This week I've had an extra set of hands helping me on the project. Andrew Berge is a master boat builder that I met when we took a trip out to Michigan in December last year. I'll be doing a separate video on that trip, so more details on that will follow soon. Andrew's built some of the world's finest wooden boats, and this week he's been over here helping me out with a handful of jobs on Temptress, and I've also been doing some CNC training with him. Andrew is going to be forming the first outlet for boat building kits within the US for us, so he's going to be able to supply CNC cut boat building kits from his shop out in northern Michigan, which is going to be really great. So I've been doing some training with him to show him the CNC cutting process and also the beveling process, which we're very soon going to be able to offer to people if they want to build boats just like this. So that was pretty cool. Working alongside Andrew for a few days on the boat was a really great experience. Working with somebody with an experience level and skill set way above my own was a really great thing, and it enabled me to learn so many little helpful tips and tricks, especially for landing these more complex twisted topside battens, which we're doing here. So I'll share those tips with you guys as we go along. So let's get cracking on the video and I'll show you what we've been up to this week. So I've only got one of two stringers at the moment, and one of the first things I needed to do this week was to laminate, shape and bevel the second stringer. So I'll start out by sorting those laminations into the order I want them, making sure that the small scarf joints are mixed up throughout the lamination stack. I can then start to glue this up, so each side of the lamination gets coated with a lightly thickened epoxy. So I'm using colloidal silica here to thicken the epoxy, and that's so that it's still runny enough that I can spread it with a roller. I apply that to either face, put those mating faces together, and then we glue up the full lamination stack. You can see I've still got my polythene on the floor here just so that everything doesn't bond to that, and my lamination jig is still screwed down to my mezzanine floor to make sure that I don't get any deflection in that as I pull up all the force that's in this stack of timbers. And we're looking for a nice even bead of squeeze out down every one of those laminations, just to make sure that we know that we've got full glue coverage throughout that joint, and that's looking pretty good. Following day, once that's cured, we can start to peel that off, and then's the process of cleaning up that lamination. Now, unfortunately, due to the size of my workshop, I'm not able to fit this through any of my machines, so I've got to do this a rather manual way. That gets a pass with the belt sander with a 40 grit belt on it, and that's just initially to knock the epoxy off, because I don't really want to be hitting that with my planer. It's probably going to do quite a bit of damage to the blades. So the belt sander just gets the squeeze out off. Then I go over to the power planer, and that allows me just to rip the material down quicker and get me a nice fair surface to the stringer. So we're about 50mm wide as the basic lamination. There's a little bit of step between the lamination layers as well, so we're going to take that down. We need to end up at a 44mm finished thickness. Once I've done that, I can begin the process of shaping the stringer to remove the spring back and to do the final sizing of the stringer, and then do the bevel as well. So all of those lines are transposed from the jig. Of course, this stringer, in comparison to the previous one, has got to be a mirrored image. So we're going to flip the stringer over, put the jig on the other face. This is a double-sided jig, so it's got engravings on both sides of it, so that I'm able to mark the bevel on the opposite side for the other stringer. Now, I don't need it screwed down for this process, and you'll see that I actually pull the jig back into the shape of the stringer here, so that I'm able to mark the bevels because the stringer is already now shaped to the correct curvature. So I use this little pencil offset jig which fits into the grooves on the line for the bevel and allows me to re-offset that line back onto the stringer. We can also then transpose the lines for each of the frames where the notches are going to lie. So we've got a line here for the forward and aft face of the frame, and then a height for the lower and the higher side of the bevel where the frame is going to transition through that stringer. So those get marked all the way down one face, taken off the face of the stringer jig. And those markings then need to be transposed round to all the faces of the stringer so they get squared across, and then I use a bevel gauge to replicate those on the second side, and then we pick up the height for the lower side of the bevel where the frames transition through the stringer. Once I've got all of those marked out, I'm ready to then start shaping things. So I start out with a power plane and I'm just taking off the bulk of the material here to start to get my bevel correct. You can see the lower line on the right hand face of the stringer here, and that is one side of my bevel. The other side of my bevel is on the left hand side of the stringer, and that's the point that I've already shaped the stringer to. So by joining these two lines together, that gives me the correct rolling bevel throughout this component. So I'm roughing out the bulk of that material with a power plane just to get me somewhere close, and then I'll transfer over to a hand plane and just dial in the last final bit of that shaping by hand. So I'm using a 4.5 plane here, which just allows me to get the full width of that stringer in one pass, but also it allows me to follow the more steep curvature up towards the forward end of this stringer. When I move to the back end of it, I go up to a 5.5 plane, which just allows me to get things a little bit straighter there. So you can see the real steep end of the bevel at the forward end there, that's terminating at frame 2 within the boat. So we're getting quite a bit of angle to it there, and then we get back to the rear end of the stringer and things flatten out quite a bit. So I'm aiming to work down to these pencil lines. I'm leaving just a little bit of pencil line there, so I've got a bit of trim and adjustment room once I drop the stringers into the boat, just in case I need it. Then I can cut the notches for the frames using my Japanese saw here, which is really good for cutting deep notches like this. So I start off on the far side of that notch, and then I will aim to leave the top end of the saw in that notch as I pull the back end of the saw right down to the full depth. And that just helps me to keep things nice and square and straight as I cut down. Don't really want this wandering here, and we don't really want to be creating too much afterwork in reshaping this. So you can see I'll just come down to the full depth of that notch line, and then I'll go around the other side, and I'll just take the second side down to the lower notch line there. I'll knock out the bulk of the material with a chisel, and you can see I can break that out fairly quickly. And then I'll come back in with the saw, and I'll just make sure that I've got a straight line between those two notch depths on either side there. I'll just take that down to a straight line, then a final little dress with a chisel, and that gives me the correct notch. Again, slightly higher the pencil line, just to give me a little bit of adjustment room should I need it when I drop these into the boat and we make the final tweaks to its size. And there's a look at the pre-beveled, pre-notched stringer. I've not yet got the thicker section glued onto this in the aft end
because I'll do that once I get this downstairs. You can see I've got the thicker section there on the first stringer. So then these two are ready to go downstairs. We're almost in a position where we can start to load these within the boat. And luckily I had Will helping me in the shop today, so I was able to pass these over the mezzanine floor to him. I can just about lift the stringers on my own, so passing them over here into downstairs would have been a bit of a challenge on my own. And you can see the other boat that we've got in the shop there, which is a 1936 Chris Craft, and that's what Will is working on whilst he's doing a couple of days a week in the shop at the moment. And you can see the true scale, both in size and weight, of those stringers once they come downstairs. These are pretty big timbers that are going to run through the boat.
One person in the middle rather than one on each end, isn't it? Because otherwise you're tripping over stuff.
So, as I mentioned, Andrew has been over with me this week and we've been doing some CNC tuition, and he's been helping me with Temptress. He is a wooden boat builder and he's based in Boyne City in Michigan, so he's definitely placed at the heart of wooden boat building. Andrew's going to be an outlet over there in US that's going to be able to supply our kits, both in basic cut form but also in the fully 3D beveled form as well. So I ran through the process of building the frames with him, cutting the basic parts such as bulkheads and frame components, and then we also ran through the process of relocating those frames on the CNC and 3D beveling them as well. To do this, we just made a mock-up frame, so we're doing frame 4 here from the Temptress assembly, just using some relatively cheap pine as a stock and some birch plywood that we had kicking around left over from another job. So you can see it's all the same process that you've seen me do with the utility throughout the proper boat, but we just did this as a tester.
Outside.
Yeah, what this actually, there's a little checkbox where you say stop to leave, so when you do a roughing pass, it'll step out the bulk material, it'll leave a mil and a half from your finished face.
Yep.
And then that bit will come in and do that final.
Ah, okay.
Depth of your first pass should really be beyond
Just a little bit beyond it.
Otherwise you'll lift the top grade.
Yes, I remember that from when you were talking about
Yeah, we've probably got 3 or 4 mil of the frame 9.
and go,
Right through.
yeah, and then clip it on the same frames that we've clipped it on at the outside.
So once we were done with the CNC training, we started doing a bit of work on Temptress. The first thing to do was a little bit of fault finding on the issues I was having with frame 9. Turned out to be not too much of a major issue really, it was just a case of making sure that everything was placed. So we got all the frames plumbed up nice and vertically, and then we started to take a handful of measurements from keel notches, water lines, various different spacings between parts to get frame 9 in a position that was correct. And actually by the end we weren't that far out really. So once we were happy that frame 9 was in the correct position that it wanted to be, we're going to put a really big brace through the boat that's going to tie frame 9 into the 4 frames that run up to it and allow us to true all of those up.
We're not got to go all the way down.
We don't have to, so long as if we lock into that leg, you know, this far up from the building jig, it's going to be rock solid, you know.
Yeah.
The top, we want locked in where it is, and then you just go back through the other ones and check to make sure they're really plumb, and you just lock them in.
Yeah.
Just lift up, about there.
Just touch out. All right with that.
Yep. Yep. Again, only moved about 1.5 mils, but yes, not nice.
So there you can see the brace that we ended up with. It runs from right on the top of the leg at frame 9 right down to the base of frame 5, and you can see that we're picking up each of the legs in between with a diagonal brace just to help keep them vertical as well and keep frame 9 tied at a nice angle, nice and solid, to be able to start loading timbers into it. So now that we've got all of the frames confirmed, braced up and exactly where they need to be, we can start to land a few more timbers. Now Andrew was helping me out with getting these topside battens sprung into place. As you saw in the previous video, these have got quite a bit of edge set to them, particularly in the forward end of the boat where there is a little bit of flare going on with the bow. So Andrew gave me some really good insight here, and that was that a really good practice is to split those topside battens down their length. So we cut those on the bandsaw to split them, and that split falls in between the transition of 2 frames so that we've not got a hard point that's likely to break the timber at that split.
Stay there. But see how much easier that went?
Yeah.
See what it did at the end? It's got a millimetre.
Oh yeah.
snap.
And the 2 have just.
It just had to.
Yeah.
But
That's
all that.
amazing for that
Yeah.
distance, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's trying to do that with the timber bound together.
It's not going to go.
It's like-
That's why you're fighting it so hard.
Yeah.
You know.
So we did a handful of these topside battens forwards, and when it comes to installing these on the boat, I'll share the full details with you of exactly how and where to cut these splits to get the correct fall.
Can you see how much twist is in them?
Yeah.
It's a lot. Well, it's got to twist a long way there, doesn't it? But it will. They're good. He says it'll go, but he can't hold it for long. Yeah.
Then once we'd done some tests with those timbers, we started to cut the landings into the stem, and Andrew showed me the process for doing that. So again, I'll go through this in full detail when I actually install these on the boat, but basically what you want to do is to transfer the profile of that stem onto the outer side of the topside batten, which you can see there. You then use a piece of wood which is the same thickness as the finished topside batten, and you transfer that notch across to give you the angle that needs to be cut at. So you can see that gets transposed out, and that matches up to that line which is the profile of the forward end of the stem. That then gives the line that you need to cut the topside batten down to spring it in and land it correctly in that notch.
into this. I've got to split it 2 meters. 2 meters, yeah. It'll be a challenge. So I think we'll just put screws straight into this one.
Yep.
Let it down a little bit. Square. Cut that one. Bust that little bit off the bottom.
Yeah.
Once the shear plate's glued in, that piece is safe. But
landed nice. So there we have nice matched pair of stringers, shaped and notched, ready to go into the boat. that will be their next place. So there we go, frames are all tied in exactly where we want them to be. That's a really good stage to get to. We're starting to land some timbers and everything's looking beautiful and fair. Really pleased with the way that's going. We've got a set of stringers downstairs, pretty much ready to go in. In the next video, we're going to put the 2 side cheeks on those because they've still got some extra material to go on the back end of them from frame 9 aft, where they're slightly more reinforced for the kind of engine bay area of the boat. So we'll do that in the next video. We'll put the cheeks on those and then we'll drop them into the boat. That's going to hopefully lock into all those frames, and then once that's done, everything's kind of confirmed and we can start bonding stuff together. So we'll be at the epoxy coating stage then. We're going to pull parts out one at a time, encapsulate them with epoxy and prep them ready to have their final place within the boat. So that's going to be a really nice stage to get to. We can really start actually bonding stuff in. So as always, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thank you for sticking around to the end of it, and an extra special thank you to the patrons that are helping me to fund this project with a little extra monthly contribution. Massively appreciate the extra that you guys are putting in to help me get this pushed forward. Thanks very much indeed. So in the next video, we'll drop in those stringers. I'll see you then. Cheers guys.